brand new online ESL teachers usually come to me with the same question. How do I become a good online ESL teacher? Or how do I make sure that I am one? Hey there, I'm Allyson from onlineteacherallyson.com, where stay-at-home parents learn how to teach online so they can earn an income from home. If you are a stay-at-home parent looking to become an online ESL teacher, you probably have the same question. How do I make sure I am a good teacher for these kiddos? And if you do, well, I'm here to say you're taking the right first step. So I have eight ways today to become a great online ESL teacher, and make sure you stick around to the end because I have a little life story to go with it. Something happened to me recently, and it's honestly the easiest one to do. All right. Okay, so before we get into this, just a little background on me is I went to school to become an elementary school teacher, and while I was there, I also had a focus on teaching ESL, English as a Second Language. At the time, I never in a bajillion years thought I would be doing it online, but I did it because I lived in an area where there was a high percentage of English learners. Their first language was not in English. And I wanted to make myself marketable fresh out of college, so I got an ESL certificate. So I took a test. I took 2 tests that were required to become just a general teacher in my state. And then I took a third to make sure I was certified to teach ESL. So just a little background on that. Don't let it freak you out. You don't need to go to college to be an ESL teacher, okay? I'm going to help you with this. So the first thing you need to do or to have to make sure you're a great online ESL teacher is to make sure you have some cultural awareness. So I'm going to use my online teaching as an example because with VIP Kid, I taught kids in China. Now, were there other kids on the platform from different places? Yes. Did I see them? Not once. The furthest away from China I got was Hong Kong on VIP Kid. And depending on who you talk to, Hong Kong is either part of or not part of China, but that's a whole. So cultural awareness is important here, no matter what culture you're teaching, because we do things in the US that's offensive to other cultures. Other cultures do things that if we saw it here in the US, we'd be like, whoa, you can't say that. You can't do that. So one of the first things I can think of 2 things. In China, a lot of times a thumbs up is a rude gesture. I use this all the time on VIP Kid because the parents wanted the complete immersive experience. As close as they could get without totally immersifying them, is that even a word? And bringing them to the States. It was very immersive. I did not speak any Chinese, and that was their point. So thumbs up was part of it, and no one ever got a bad review for that I know of, because we used it and it was offensive, but it was mentioned a few times. Another thing I can think of is in Saudi Arabia, feet and shoes are seen as disrespectful. So you don't want to be pulling your foot or your shoe up to the camera. And you might think I'm crazy for even suggesting it. But if you're teaching foot, it's a great prop, right? It's built in. If you're teaching shoe, it could be so easy to take off your shoe and shoe. So those are the things you kind of want to be aware of. So you don't accidentally stumble into it while you're trying to be a great teacher, because holding up a prop of a shoe, I'm getting to that. That is a characteristic of a great online ESL teacher. But if it is offensive to the culture you're teaching and the families have the expectation that you will be respectful, especially in their culture and in their ways, then you want to be aware of that. Tip number 2 for becoming a good online ESL teacher is to have awareness of ESL student characteristics. Now, in these next 2 tips, tip 2 and 3, I'm going to get a little technical, but don't feel like you have to go to college to learn these things, because I'm going to help you out here. And if I can't help you out, I have somewhere you can go. Okay? You don't have to go to college for this, I swear. ESL students are different from your students that have been growing up speaking English. They go through different phases. So one of them is called the silent period. It's exactly what it sounds like. They spend a few months, a few weeks, depending on the student, being silent. They're not going to give you any output. They're just sitting there listening and absorbing. And just because they're silent, it doesn't mean they're not listening. I want you to think back to when your kids were babies. Did they say anything to you that made any sense whatsoever? No. But have things come out of their mouth that you look at them and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. I need to stop doing that. Or is that just me? The things my son has uttered where I'm like, oh, he 100% got that from me. And it's not even necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it's lazy English that I talked about last week. If you caught last week's video, if you didn't, here it is linked for you. Maybe it's just a phrase that it's okay for grown-ups, but not so much for kids. And I don't even mean cuss words. I mean like earmuffs. If your kids are around, I'm not going to say a cuss word, but to some people, you don't like it, like suck. Like that sucks. My mom didn't like that when we were growing up. Now she doesn't say anything, but I'm also in my 30s. Right? So if you don't want your kids saying that and you say it and then they come out and say, oh, that sucks. You'll be like, whoa, I say that. I got to stop. So they do go through a silent period, back to the point. And just because they're quiet doesn't mean they're not listening. They are still learning. Auditory learners are a thing. And whether that's their primary learning strategy or not, they're still learning. And there's a ton more things about this where you can learn all about ESL student characteristics. And this is why I recommend you get your TESOL. Because one, a lot of platforms require it. And two, I just really do think it'll make you a better ESL teacher. I know it made me one. All right, tip number 3 of how to become a great online ESL teacher is to be aware of ESL teaching strategies. Now, some of these are really just general teaching strategies because the US in particular has so many types of cultures and ethnicities and all these groups, and it's not always, English is not everyone's first language, and you're going to see this in just about every classroom across America where someone has a first language other than English. And this is great for any learner, any student. I do this with my son. Remember when we're teaching them how to talk, we're outside and we're looking at flowers. I say flower. Can you say flower? I do that with my son. And granted, it's a flower outside, but this is what I have here. So if you are looking for great ESL teaching strategies, I do have a training for you. Right now it's waitlisted because it's not open. The waitlist will get first dibs when it is open because spots are limited. onlineteacherallyson.com/get hired. It's linked down below for you. And a freebie here, one of the things I talk about a lot in this free training is the use of props. I've already referenced it a couple times in this video with the flower and the shoe. And usually I have a basket of props I can pull up and show you some examples. But we are upgrading my teaching area, so I've got some stuff cleaned up and moved out of the room for right now because I'm not teaching classes online. And we need room to take out the old and bring in the new. I'm really excited to show you when it's ready. So anyways, props is a big one. And if this is your first video with me, welcome. Do not spend money on props. If it's not your first video with me, you have probably heard this before. I really don't want you to spend money on props, especially when you're just getting started. What I do recommend is rating your kids' toys. You probably have something. If you're teaching animal names or animal sounds, do you have little toy, like plastic animals you can pull out? Do you have something in a book? Those are props, and they're free now. We've already bought them. Someone has. Go raid the toys. Put them back when you're done. All right. How to be a good online ESL teacher. Number 4 is to have preparedness for each and every lesson, or as much as you can. So odds are you're going to know about your lesson ahead of time. It's going to be booked days, weeks, hours in advance. And every chance you get, I want you to go through that lesson before the class. And there's a couple reasons for this. One, it's going to help you pace your lessons. So you're going to know about how many slides you should tick through a minute. You're going to know what's at the beginning, what's at the end, so you can prepare them for it at the beginning. You're going to know where your student is going to struggle, because this is part of preparedness. As you get repeat students, regulars, you're going to know their strengths and their weaknesses. And while you're preparing, it gives you time to think about how you can practice things they're struggling with, whether it's a sentence or a sound or a vocabulary word. And it's also going to let you think about places you can go quickly because they've got it. So it lets you really prepare for that individual student. And the beauty of online ESL for me is that I can give that one student my undivided attention for 30 minutes on average, depends, right? And I want that undivided attention to be catered exactly to what they need. Now, will you know this for a brand new to you student? No. You might have some hints and like old feedback if you get that of what they're struggling with, but you might not. And you might just be figuring that part out on the fly until you get to know that student. And that's okay too. That doesn't make you a bad teacher. It's just the nature of online ESL. You're not going to have a repeat student every time. You have to get new students somehow, and that's how. So as prepared as you can be. So if you don't know that student, you can be working on your pacing, on your timing, on what props you're going to use. If you want to use a reward, what reward you want to use, and thinking about the ending if you know it. Because tip number 5 is understanding the flow of your lessons. And I don't just mean the individual lesson where you're getting prepared. I mean the whole unit and the whole level. So VIP Kid, if we take it down to its most singular level, it was a lesson. And that lesson was within a unit. So each unit, depending on what level, had about like 6 to 8 classes, 6 to 8 lessons. And in that unit, we had a whole level, right? So we go level, the biggest one, depending on how many, units are there. A level is made up of units, and units are made up of lessons. So the level is the largest. Level 1, they are brand new speakers. Unit 1. And within Unit 1, the first lesson, we're talking about introductions. Maybe the second lesson, we're talking about colors. And the third, we're talking about numbers. But we're all doing an introduction to speaking English in Level 1, Unit 1, lesson whatever. Now, this is just off the top of my head. This is not really any class anywhere, but it is a way to understand how your classes are flowed. And you're not going to know this right away unless you have the privilege of looking through all of the classes ahead of time. So the VIP Kid, we had like a rundown of level 1, but I couldn't look at every slide for every lesson. I had to wait till they came in. So you get really good at knowing, at the end of this unit, they're going to want my student to know this. Let's start practicing now because my students in the past have really struggled. So as you get going as an online ESL teacher, you're going to learn that, and that's going to make you a great online ESL teacher. And while you are learning, be patient with yourself and just make some notes if you need it. How to be a great online ESL teacher. Number 6 is your classroom setup. Now, I am not saying you have to have a fancy background like this. This isn't even fancy. I'm not even saying you have to have a background. What I am saying is you want a quiet space devoted to lessons. It is very distracting if your background is distracting, if you've got the TV going and kids running around and dogs and whatever else is happening in your house. You want a quiet area devoted just to teaching. So for me, this is a spare bedroom. And within this spare bedroom, I have my corner, which is about my arm's length. On the other side, I've got, honestly, it's more teaching stuff that I've covered up because I don't really use it. And then over here is my husband's half of the room. So my husband and I are not in here at the same time because that would take away from the quiet atmosphere. So I just want you to think of where you can make a quiet atmosphere. Come back to the background later. But when you're ready for online classroom setup, I've got a free download for you to help you do it. onlineteacherallyson.com/setup, also linked down below. All right, how to be a great online ESL teacher, number 7. We've got one more after this. Remember, a total of 8 is consistency. So first thing, consistency with the times you are teaching, because this sets your body up for success. When I was not teaching consistently, I was just kind of teaching like any and everything I could. I was not a good teacher because I could not be prepared. I was tired. I wasn't giving it my all, and I was missing classes. I probably talked about this before. I talk about it a lot, and mistakes you can make as an online ESL teacher. They're expensive. When I was not teaching consistently, I was not as good of a teacher. And my students couldn't book consistently with me. If I only opened the 7 o'clock slot here and there, then they're probably going to stick around with the teacher who opened that 7 o'clock slot every day they wanted it. Every Wednesday or every day of the week, whatever it happened to be for that student and their family. So when you're consistent, it's a lot nicer on your body. You're a lot more rested, and it's a lot easier for students when they're doing scheduling too. And number 8, my last one, tip number 8 to becoming a great online ESL teacher is you are happy to be there. So story time. My son is enrolled in swim lessons. And he's in 2 sessions. We just finished 1 and we started session number 2. He moved up a level. So proud of him. He's doing great. But here's the thing. When I got to the new level, he obviously got new teachers with it. And what I noticed was those teachers weren't happy to be there, and it reflected in their teaching because there wasn't much teaching happening. So I paid for these swim lessons. These families pay for online ESL lessons. And if you're not happy to be there, you're not giving it your all. There's not as much learning as can be. There's not as much learning as there can be. So if you're not happy to be there, you're not preparing as well. You're probably not preparing as well. You're probably not using as many ESL strategies as you could. You're probably not consistent. And it's probably coming across in your tone of voice and your body language. And students can see that. So if you're not happy to be there and you maybe figure this out about yourself, then maybe online teaching isn't for you. And that's okay, right? Not everyone can be a teacher. And I'm not just saying your capabilities, but because it's your personality or it's your wants and desires for the season in your life. And if online teaching isn't for you, well, I'm sorry, it's not. I wish it was because I love it. But I want to wish you luck on your journey to finding what is for you, right? So if you are not happy to be there, it does come across in your lessons. And for me personally, it's something I think about all the time. Am I happy to be doing these lessons right now? Because I want to give these kiddos, for me kiddos, the best, because classes are not cheap. And so I had mentioned that I was going to be opening slots this summer, and I opened a few, and I was not happy to be there. I wasn't happy to be doing the early mornings again. I wasn't happy to be tired and happy to be scrutinized so hard, and what it felt at 5 a.m, right? So it's not for the season of life anymore. When we have another kid, it probably will be for that season of life again. But for me right now, first thing in the morning is not for my season of life. So we are finding something else to do until my job starts back up, online teaching, in the fall. So those are 8 ways you can become a great online ESL teacher. I've got all the videos and the links I've mentioned also in the comments below, in the description box below. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or shoot me an email. I would love to answer your question for you. I hope you're having the greatest week ever, and we'll chat soon. Bye.